Hello, and welcome back to Robots Don't Age. And on today's episode, we will be discussing the Alita manga volume 1 and 2. But first, with me here today is Kiani
Hello, everybody.
and a very special guest, Ray.
G'day, everybody.
And of course, I'm your beautifully bearded co host, Cody. And I thought instead of our usual openings, we would just talk to our guest here and, kind of dig into what they're up to and their history with Alita as a franchise and fandom. So I know we've discussed this briefly on Twitter, but just to get everybody caught up, how long have you been a fan of the Alita franchise?
Well, the Alita franchise was originally started in Japan by Yukito Kishiro in 1990 in a trade magazine. They're sort of magazines that are they have serialized mangas written into them. So there's like a number of different stories that run monthly. And that started in 1990. It came to Australia in a graphic novel format in about 94, and that's when I found it. And so I've been reading this for, what is it now? 27 years. Yeah. So,
That's awesome.
Huh, a little bit of time there.
You could say I'm interested.
yeah, just a touch. Just a touch. Well, I mean, the thing is, you can't continually read something over and over again because you would get bored of it. So what I do is I'll read up to where Yukito Kishiro is up to because he's still writing it. It just passed his
Wow.
30th birthday and he's still at it. He slowed down a little bit, but he's still putting together. Well, there's three blocks. There's the original series, which ran from 90 to 94. He sort of finished that early because he was quite ill, and he thought he was going to die, so he kind of didn't want his seminal work to be unfinished. So he rushed an ending on it, and then he wasn't writing anything for a few years, and he recovered from this illness. I still don't know to this day what actually it was wrong with him, but he managed to recover. But there's another one, I haven't read it. It's called Gumu or Gunham, depending on your pronunciation.
Gundam?
No, not Gundam.
Oh,
Gunnm.
okay,
It's
Gundam.
the direct translation is Gun Dream, so that's what it is
Okay.
in Japan. And then when originally Viz Comics translated it with the original translation in 1992-ish, I think it was, that they translated it for the English market in the US. They thought, well, the main character was called Galley, and there's this funny thing with the Japanese language that there's no distinction between L's and R's, so it could actually be Gary. It's a bit it's a bit hard to tell,
Huh.
but most people say Galley. Basically, they went, oh, Galley. It's not a name that really rolls off the tongue in English. Can we come up with something different? And they were thinking about a whole bunch of other different names, and they settled on Alita. There's actually a very small article that I've got floating around here somewhere. Maybe I can post it up on Twitter for you that explains how that all came to pass. But basically, they sort of rebadged it as Battle Angel Alita, and that's what the English know it as. And her name became Alita. But in places like France, where gun is very big, she's still called Galley, and in Italy she's Galley, and in Germany she's Galley, and these places are all quite big for the manga. And so when this movie came out, it was called Battle Angel Alita. All these other countries are like, what? But because it's English and it's made in America, and tough luck, you just have to deal. So that's sort of how that came to pass. But yeah, it's he wrote sort of the first chunk, and then he went, oh, I he was really ill, and then he recovered, and he went, I want it to continue. So he actually made the last volume, volume 9, non-canon. So I kind of consider that Alita's dream while she's being reconstructed by Nova in Zalem. This is spoilers, massive spoilers. Sorry, I apologize. Um, Even if I told you everything that happened, you still need to read this manga because it is incredible. But anyway, he decided he wanted to continue the story. So there's eight official volumes in the first series, and the second series, Last Order, there's 19 volumes. So it's like
Oh my gosh.
huge. It takes a fair bit of reading. I've read the first one 14 or 15 times, and since I
Oh.
started writing a fan novelization version of a second movie, I have read chunks of it over and over and over again, trying to get a real feel for it. But the second
That's
one,
nice.
the second one, Last Order, I've only read probably 4 times because it's so huge. But what I would do is I'd read up to where he's finished writing that's available at the time, and then I'd leave it for a few years, and then I'd start from the beginning again and read all the way through up to where he's up to. So he's now writing a third one, which he started in 2014, I want to say, maybe 2015, called Mars Chronicles, and it's a little bit more confusing, mainly because it has two timelines in it. It has the current timeline in the main first two parts running again further on, but then it stops and goes back into her memories, which she's recently recovered most of, and she's remembering her past. So it's sort of talking about her origin story of the origin story. So yeah, I mean, when it's a 30-year story, it can get very complex and convoluted. So there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot to enjoy. It's not one of
Hmm.
those things that you're going to be like, if you look at these animes that they make recently, and I have been catching up on a few animes, you get 12 episodes and then it stops, and it's like, but I was just getting into it,
It's unbelievably frustrating.
isn't it? I was watching one. What was it called? Well, this was a couple of months ago, but No Game, No Life. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I have not.
Neither have I.
I highly recommend it, but it does get frustrating because it's again 12 episodes and it stops. But it's there's something about manga where, and manga that's converted into anime where the stories are really complex and really amazingly um, I won't say complex in a sort of a negative term, but there's so much richness to them and there's so much detail, and you sort of go, God, I wish I could write something like that. It's so
It's almost as if they dig into it as deeply as it would if it was a book or a novel, as opposed to like when you go to watch a movie and it's like they try to shove like 6 years of something like, convoluted and chopped up into, a 2 hour or an hour and a half movie.
And I know I've discussed this a couple of times, like with the difference between anime and like regular shows, but you can get away with a lot more in terms of violence and the graphics and gore with anime
You
because
can.
like I was thinking about this when I was actually reading the Alita volumes. I was like, oh, this would actually be much better as an anime, I think, than it did as a movie. 'Cause even though they
Yeah,
got a lot of things like correctly in the movie and a lot of shot for shot things, there's a lot of like the violence and gore and brain eating that I feel like would transfer over really well in an animated platform.
I agree.
yeah, brain eating. Mm. I won't go into why biologically that doesn't work, but when we get into the sort of the guts of the first volume, then we can talk about how things work and how things don't work and stuff like that. But I mean, this is the future, so there's a lot of leeway. But yeah, the tone is different for the movie versus the OVA versus the manga, but they all have their place, I think. And Kishiro has said himself that he's very happy with the movie, that it held the ideal of Alita and the story, and also um, it was true to his intentions. So he was very happy with that.
Well, that's good.
And there are a lot of things. Well, like we'll get into it. I'll wait until we discuss the volumes and we can compare it with some things with the movies. But Kiani, do you have anything you'd like to discuss? Anything given up to you before we go to commercial break?
No, not at the moment. I do not.
Okay, we will be back here in just a couple minutes after this short word from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, this is George, the Bone King, interrupting this transmission to tell you about the Fan Freaks podcast. The podcast where we freak out about our favorite movies, games, comics, and any media in between. Check us out on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Hope to get freaky with you all very soon.
And we're back discussing Alita Volumes 1 and 2. Now, Ray, earlier I know you mentioned there were several different books. I'm assuming we have the original one from 90 to 94, right? That period?
Yeah. So that's the original series. You may have you've got the large Codicea translation, which is the more recent one. There was one before that done by Viz. A lot of people prefer the original translation, but I have noticed some well, I wouldn't call them improvements, but sort of stylistic choices that were quite good in the new one, and the printing is beautiful in the new volumes. But it does lose some of the character that I really liked from the original translation. So um, I if you're a real fan, you have both basically.
I admit we're a little late to the fandom here, but I think I can't speak for Keanu, but I think after reading the first one, we're both really interested in continuing.
Yes, most definitely.
You didn't hear me say this because I support Kishiro and his life work, but you can find the original translation online if you go looking.
Okay,
So
dig around. I definitely want a digital copy.
you can actually compare them. But um, I would impress upon your listeners that this is this man's life work and it is worth paying for. It is that good. I mean, well, most things are worth paying for. Somebody spent you know years of their life producing it for you. So.
Pouring all that passion into it. I agree.
Oh yeah, well, the context of the characters and the stories in this is basically Kishiro has said that all these characters are parts of his character, like they're all in his head all the time.
Hmm.
So, and Alita has become my muse over the last half of my life. So basically, I've got Alita in my head as well, but all of these characters are part of him and he sort of draws them out and that's why they feel so grounded and so real because he's lived with them for most of his life. So
I would not want a lot of these characters bouncing around in my head. I'm just gonna throw that one out there.
well, I mean, you think about the most annoyed you've ever been, like if you really raged on somebody for something,
Yes.
that would be Dan.
That's fair. Like maybe I would at one point have liked to have used grind cutters on a person if I was mad enough. Doesn't mean I would have done it, but it's like that thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, inside your head, there's no laws, there's no morality, everything's possible, and that's where you get characters like Destiny Nova from.
Okay.
The unshackled, moralless quest to discover something that you're obsessed about, and you can break these characters down into absolute simple passions and feelings and
Personality traits and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the characters have like clear set desires, especially Alita. She kind of puts everything, forward obviously as the main character. Um so the volume kind of starts the same way the movie did, and I noticed there were a lot of similarities, clearly a few differences, but is the first thing that I wanted to point out is that it seems like the movie did follow this very faithfully.
It did.
yes and no. One thing that I describe to people over and over again is that while the manga was written by one person in a serial format, so he wrote the first volume, then he wrote the second volume, then he wrote the third volume, he wrote the fourth volume, and he was coming up with the stuff as he went. Right. So I write novels, and there's different ways of writing. There's having a plan and knowing roughly what's going to happen, and it's sort of like having waypoints in a navigator, and you know where you're supposed to get to, but you don't know exactly how you're going to be getting there, and you sort of work like that, or you can what's called pantsing it, and that means that you've got a vague endpoint, but everything else is just up open slather, and he was writing this to a monthly timetable. So he had to have the next section done the next month. So he was flat out with this thing, and in doing that, you don't have a lot of time to project forward. So things sort of just appear in the manga that had no sort of connection beforehand. Whereas the movie, when it was produced, well, it was actually referencing the OVA. I don't know if you guys have seen the OVA, have you?
I have not no.
The short anime. You should do that. So have a look on YouTube. It's on there. Try and watch the UK dub because it's a little less annoying than the US dub. Just
That seems fair.
Some of the voice actress for Alita is a little bit more. How can I describe this delicately? Just a little bit less harsh.
You don't have to be delicate here.
No, don't I? That makes life easier, doesn't it?
Use any description you want.
She's preferable. Yeah, try and watch the UK dub because it's a little easier on the ears. But basically, I'm one of the organisers in the Alita Army, which is the global fandom, which is trying to get a second movie. So your listeners may not know this, so I have to take yet another step back. The movie was produced by James Cameron and John Landau. The director was Robert Rodriguez. James Cameron was supposed to be putting this together in the late noughties, but then he got hooked on the whole Avatar thing, and Alita sat on the shelf. And Robert Rodriguez was having lunch with him one day and said, "Whatever happened to that Alita thing that you were working on?" He said, "Oh, it's still on the shelf. Do you want to have a look at it?" And Rob Rod said, "Yeah, sure." He says, "Look, I've overwritten it. It's 2.5 hours long, but I don't think we can get the money for that long. If you can like work it down to an hour and make it still, 2 hours and make it still work, then we might have a shot at this. Do you want to have a go?" He said, "Yeah, sure." So he took it away for the summer and got it from 2.5 hours down to 2 hours. Worked out a way to do it in which all of the things were still there that Cameron really liked, and Cameron said, "Right, well, you're the man for the job. You can direct it. We'll go see 20th Century Fox bigwigs, studio heads, and see if we can get some money for this saga." And Cameron had always intended to make Alita a digital character, even back when he first started this in the early 2000s, which is pretty ballsy for things like this.
Yeah, it's a bold choice for the technology they had available at the time, especially considering he waited so long to make Avatar.
Well, he created most of that technology. He created the 3D space cameras. I use space not as in up in space, but a 3D field cameras. And he uses heaps of cameras, and he was involved in the development of the what do they call it? The performance capture technology.
Oh, the motion capture.
Yeah. So originally was motion capture, which is the dots on the suit,
Right.
which they got right for Gollum, and that was through Weta. And then he was involved with the performance capture technology as well. And apparently, for the next Avatar movie, he was trying to make a glassless 3D technology, which would have solved it for a lot of people, because I know there's a lot of people who don't like 3D because they already wear glasses for distance vision, and it doesn't work together particularly well. So he's trying to make a glassless 3D technology which is more acceptable to the masses, and then 3D would make a comeback, because I love 3D.
Yeah, I don't personally wear glasses, but I do kind of find it annoying when I have to go into a movie to wear the 3D ones. It's just kind of like an added layer of nuisance that I don't need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, each to their own. I bought a 2016 TV secondhand, which had only been used like 3 times. God knows why, but the person said it was too small, but it's 55 inch, so
How big do you need?
Well, I walked into this guy's house to buy this television, and he had an entire wall, like a wall of the room, and the projector was mounted in the hallway with a cutout in the wall to get the focal distance for the projector.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
Actually.
And so this guy was an absolute videophile, and said that a 55 centimeter TV was too small. But this was 2016 was when they made 4K 3D TVs with HDR. Now you can't watch 4K and 3D at the same time, because 3D is a 1080p codec. It doesn't. They never made a 4K one because it wasn't popular enough to redo it for the higher resolution. But I've got Alita in 4K and 3D, and it's way better in 3D. I can sit here and watch it in 3D anytime I want in my office, and it is the best 3D movie I have ever seen. You can see through her body, the way she moves through the air when they're doing motorball. It's just fantastic.
I bet it would be an awesome movie in 3D. I bet that is really cool.
It really is.
Yeah, the visuals for the movie are absolutely stunning. Everything from like the basic motorball practice to her fighting. I'm gonna butcher all of their names, but the gentleman with the grind cutter and the bar brawl. When she was diving like between the grind cutters, it was just great visualization. I imagine in 3D that would look spectacular.
Oh yeah, it is fantastic. I mean, it was such a shame that the when the movie came out, Disney was in the process of acquiring 20th Century Fox, and basically the advertising guys weren't doing their job. They were sending out the resumes to get new jobs because they knew they were going to lose their jobs. So yeah, that's why nobody heard about it. I mean, the original plan was for this to be the Star Wars for the 2020s. I don't know how you feel about where Star Wars went with the sequel trilogy, but as I keep banging on in just about every time I'm recorded, and I jump on a lot of podcasts to talk about Alita. Um, Basically, when you put message over story, you turn people off because people who want to go to a thing about that has message over story go to a political rally. People who want to be entertained go to a movie to see a story. You make the story engaging, and then the message sits behind that and sinks in through osmosis. You don't make it all about the message, and that's why this whole go woke, go broke thing has been happening. People aren't showing up to these movies because they're not enjoyable, because they're message, they're not story. People come to be entertained. Entertain the people and have your story in the background, and it'll get in anyway. They just haven't worked this out yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of the problems that I have with some movies is that like they try to send a message, but it's ham-fisted. They want you to know so much so that they keep putting it in your face, then it just kind of puts you out, like you said. It's not giving you the immersion that I feel like you used to get from a lot of theatrical experiences.
And a lot of times when you spoon feed a message to people, they won't accept it. A lot of the time, you need people to have to think about these things and come to their own conclusion, and they own it. But if you try and force it on them, people often reject it, and that's why these movies haven't been popular. They're just not
It's
fun.
better to come to the message on your own through the story. Like you have this great moment, this great storyline, and then you're like, "Oh, I see it. I see what they were really trying to say." Like you have to let them come to it on their own. That totally makes sense.
Yeah, which is kind of like what I'm looking forward to the more we read with Alita, because it feels like there's going to be a lot that it kind of digs into. And I know someone on Twitter mentioned this particular, but it was about like how it's kind of figuring out what it means to be human. And I'm kind of really into that concept and finding out where that story goes.
Well, that is the basis of the cyberpunk sort of ethos. What does it mean to be human? I mean, we walk around in these meat bags that have a finite lifespan. They break down, they fall apart, and then whatever the hell it is that animates them goes away, and then they just get broken down to their constituent parts and end up back in the food cycle. Back, we either get burnt or we get buried or what have you, and then other microorganisms pick you up and your bits go off. And but where does all that knowledge go? Where does all that experience go? What happens to it all? What does it mean to be human? Can you experience that without having a biological brain? Do you actually exist? Do we exist? Is this a simulation? What does it mean to be human? I mean,
That's a big question.
It's some pretty heady stuff.
oh yeah. I mean, you can sort of drive yourself into existential dread just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I started to as you were talking about it, and I'm gonna do a very ham-fisted segue here. So, I mean, yeah, that is a question that, like, I think Alita in particular, at least because I don't read mangas in particular or anything like that, but like with Alita, I'm really excited to dig into it and see like how it answers that question and what it kind of digs into because the character Alita herself, like, as it depicted in the movie as well, is like a very emotional, open
Mhm.
person. It seems like and like very loving and caring. And I mean, arguably that makes her like with her empathy and all that, like she's the most human like person in the manga.
Yes and no. She's certainly the most like emotional person in the movie. And I don't know if you've read Pat Cadigan's excellent novelizations of the movie and a prequel novel, which is sort of like more information on the other characters around Alita in the movie. Have you read either of those?
No.
Okay, so It's a little bit complicated because you have what I call the mangaverse, which is what you've been started to read now. Like it's like the pilot of a TV series that ran for 7 seasons. You basically, in reading the first 2 volumes, you've read the pilot. So to give it a context, it's like the pilot of a TV series. Nothing's bedded down yet. The ideas are still developing. The writer's still finding his voice. The artwork is still preliminary. You cannot base your like or dislike or understanding of the manga on the first 2 volumes. It really is a bit rough, but it gets amazingly good pretty much by volume 3. So from volume 3, you'll be hooked. I can pretty much guarantee it. But the context of manga, you were saying that neither of you have really read much in the way of manga.
No.
I have not, no.
I read a lot of graphic novels, but I know that there's a difference, and
But these are sort of Western graphic novels, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What about anime? Have either of you watched much anime?
I have recently been put on anime. I've watched about, I think I'm on like my 6th one now. So I'm getting there. But yes.
What about you, Cody? Any anime?
I've watched a few here and there, but it's not really something I normally pick up.
Right. So they don't sort of resonate with you. Is that what I'm sort of getting?
Yeah, it's just out of the things that I usually sit down to watch, it normally leans more towards like sitcom or live action stuff.
Yep. Fair enough. Okay. So I'm actually in the middle of writing a article about this manga, for Comic Watch, and it's been quite complex to write an overview of it because the more you know, the harder it is to write about. I think you sort of spoiled for choice about what to say, but the context of a manga for a Western audience is a little bit difficult because the context of a manga is that it's through the lens of Japanese culture. Japanese culture is not like Western cultures. It's a culture that is very, well, I wouldn't say very insular. It's quite insular, and it's very inward looking. The whole idea of Japanese culture is that they watch each other and they try and keep each other on the straight and narrow. So you can almost say that it's a suppressed culture, and because it's suppressed, they hold everything in until they can't, and it just comes exploding out. So you'll see a lot of times in anime where everybody's cool, calm, and collected, and suddenly they just lose their shit.
Yes, I've definitely noticed that. It's like, especially like if they're going through something traumatic or like a fight or whatever, like they will hold it together up until everything's done, and then somebody's like sobbing and losing it, or they'll be calm, cool, and collected for the most part, and then when someone gets angry, they don't just get slightly angry; they flip shit. And so, yes, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And in a lot of those sort of teenage angst animes, certainly the guys will completely lose it about something, like oh my god, she looked at me, completely lose their shit, right? They go ape. That is a very Japanese thing because of the culture, and it's sort of the water that they swim in. So obviously they write manga for the Japanese audience, and it's just that the Westerners have gone, hey, this stuff is cool, let me read some of that. But we don't have that cultural understanding. We don't swim in that water, we swim in a different water. So some people will come to read manga and they won't quite get it, like, why do the characters suddenly flip out? Why the hell is it like that? What is this fan service thing?
Wait a minute. People don't just randomly flip out and start yelling randomly in your households when you guys were growing up?
I mean, mine did, but that was a toxic environment.
Well, I mean, it doesn't even have to be toxic. It's just that they'll attempt to stay cool, calm, and collected the entire time, and then they'll flip out.
It's just an overload of emotion,
and that's a very Japanese thing. But it's sort of the way it suddenly comes on out of the blue that can sort of throw people off. And there's also this thing called fan service, which is just basically if something's written for men, there'll be tits and ass in it, and it'll just appear randomly, almost like just because it has to be there. There is some scenes in the third volume where she Alita's involved in motorball, where suddenly you see Jashigan's sister, who we don't know how old she is exactly. She's a teenager somewhere, hopefully old enough, but suddenly she's having a shower. And you see her in the shower. So it's like, but Kishiro's not really into that. He's not like, he doesn't tend to sexualize his characters. But I suspect that the publisher said you need some fan service or you're going to lose the male audience. So he's like, okay, naked woman, there you go. Now go away, leave me alone, kind of thing. So there's a lot of I've picked up on a lot of that sort of thing through it. But just as context, manga is a little bit different. There's also this vaguely creepy vibe of men and very young
Yeah.
women that crops up in anime and manga, and I don't have an explanation for that. I think that's just a Japanese thing.
I mean, we have celebrities that do that as well, so it's
I
not
know.
too, different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot of that going around.
yeah, but it's almost a social construct in Japan with manga. Like it'll just appear, it'll just be there because they're so used to it, kind of thing. And they kind of get away with it because it's drawings and it's not like
Yeah.
live action. But the thing that I really liked about the movie was that the first two volumes is basically, except for the motorball part, what the movie was based from, and the OVA as well. Now, originally, James Cameron optioned the OVA as a source for the movie. So that's why the OVA and the movie are very similar in a lot of ways, except for the rating, sort of like the violence. And well, actually, the violence is pretty close, but there's no sex. There's sex in the OVA.
Damn it, I said tits and ass.
Exactly. So that's what you're getting. But let's just say that Vector and Sheeran, that happens on his desk. That happens in the novelization for the movie as well, because that was written from the early R-rated script before Rodriguez got to it. So, I mean, it's a little bit confusing in the way that it all came together, but I really do feel like the movie was very representative and improved on certain things. As we get into talking about the actual details of the volumes, there's actually a section in there with the Berserker body. So if you've seen the movie, you know what the Berserker body is. But in the movie, she goes out and finds it, and I think that's the best iteration. She goes and finds it in a crash ship. Great.
I liked that as opposed to how in this one it was he had found it, because I feel like in the movie, at least it being that version of it, I like that it was almost like it called to her in a sense. Like I like that.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
that body was her home and that's where she was supposed to be, as opposed to him being like, look, I've had this thing in the closet in my basement for years now, and I suppose I can give it to her because that's clearly what she needs. But I do like the concept of him being, because like, yeah, he had his little fit about her not being his dress up doll in the manga, but I feel like in the manga, I feel like he was a little bit better about being like, you know what, a little more accepting of, okay, this is who she is.
Yeah, there was that thing in the movie too, which I thought was also translated, well, I guess translated to the movie, but her kind of like rebellious spirit, it was kind of exemplified when she went to go get the suit or the body in the movie, like stuff like that, where she'd just go off and disregard what Ido wanted. And that's kind of like a trait that I appreciated about her in the movie that I feel like is also in the manga, at least from what I can tell so far.
Yeah, we had Leta Kalogridis, who is a screenwriter and executive producer. She co-wrote the original script with James Cameron, and we had her on Radio Chaos, the Alita Army live stream that's on Saturdays a couple of weeks ago. Oh, wow, that was an amazing interview. We got so much sort of background, interesting material about how they put the movie together. We have certain members of the Elite Army who are big on the script, and they were just like doing backflips, talking to her and getting that sort of deep information about how the script was put together and the themes that ran through it and all this sort of stuff. And it was terrific.
Yeah, it does seem like it would be a great guest to have someone who's really involved and hands-on, can give you a little bit more detail with the movie and the process behind like the writing of it.
But you got to think that this is a Cameron thing. So she was actually doing that in 2001. So 18 years before the movie came out.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully Robert Rodriguez came by, I guess, right?
Exactly, and we'd still be waiting. But Rodriguez said that he tried to make a Cameron movie, but he can't help but put his own style into it, and that's why the motorball sequences were so amazingly good. You got really full on high speed action, but it was viewable. It wasn't shaky cam. There wasn't things going past so fast you couldn't follow them. Everything had a place. Everything moved, and the camera moved to cover it and capture it. And I got a lot of time for Rodriguez, I got to say.
Out of curiosity, Ray, have you ever seen the El Mariachi trilogy?
I've seen bits of it, like late night television. I need to actually sit down and watch the whole thing from beginning to end.
For those who aren't familiar, the El Mariachi trilogy is well, I guess the first one, El Mariachi, is Robert Rodriguez's first movie, and then the other two subsequently finished out the trilogy. But in the second movie, he has an amazing action scene just in the bar, and you can actually find like on YouTube a little clip of him like walking through the action for the scene and doing it step by step and doing like the choreography for it. And that was at the very least late '90s, maybe early 2000s. So you can see like how he's always kind of had that flair for action scenes and the cinematic like angles and how to make everything look spectacular.
Yeah, he's really got an eye for it. Did either of you catch the episode that he did on The Mandalorian?
Yes, I can't recall which one exactly. I know I think spoiler alert for that. Isn't it the one where he introduced Boba Fett?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I definitely caught that one.
Yeah, it was basically the one that was sort of like a cross between Star Wars and GI Joe with with the sort of the action. Apparently, it was a 19-page script and it would have only run for 10 minutes, um, and he had to bulk it out with some action. So that's what he did.
If you
And
need someone to bulk it out with action, you get Robert Rodriguez. That's my
that's
opinion.
right.
So, like I mentioned earlier, the first few pages of this kind of start out similar enough to the movie. She falls out, she's in a scrap pile, and she's found by Dr. Ido. And we discuss, she finds her body in a little bit of a different way. Do you guys have anything in particular you'd like to discuss for volume one?
I I just have little notes on different things that kind of like went on in there. Like I liked when he was carrying her in the little backpack, like she's a swaddled little baby and it's just her head. I don't know why I found that so enjoyable, like while he was searching for, a body to put her in.
Yeah, it was like a very
Um,
protective, nurturing type of care that he was giving to her head.
yeah, because like, in the movie she was just off jump, getting hooked up to stuff he already had. And so I enjoy that he was still on the hunt, but he still like carried her around and stuff. I thought that was
It
neat.
was very much like when pushing your baby in a stroller and
Mhm.
it's still trying to make sense of the world, and the
Mhm.
way it was in the manga compared to the other two, because obviously, um, when you got to get through a whole volume of a manga in 30 minutes or 25 minutes actually for the OVA. So it's the cliff notes basically. And I will say that OVAs in the 90s were made to sell mangas. So you'd have a short OVA, get people into the story, and then they go back and buy the manga. So that's specifically what those were created for. There's another one. Well, this is actually late 80s. Called Outlanders, which I highly recommend. Now the OVA is it's on the silly side. There's some aliens that are completely bonkers, and it's basically the OVA is written as a teenage fairy tale of a space princess coming down and wanting to marry it. But the manga is actually way deeper than that, and I highly recommend Outlanders as a classic manga to read. It's got some amazing artwork in it of biological ships that look like Nautiluses, like starships, and it's got all sorts of alien races which are like the furries would love it. There's a guy called Garibaldi who's like a giant bear kind of guy. and there's a cat girl who's the best friends of the princess and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's all that sort of stuff. But it's sort of got a technological cyberpunky feel to it as well. It's a lot of that running through mangas from that period. Sorry, I've run off into a completely different direction. I apologize. But these all of these sort of late 80s, early 90s mangas, it was sort of the style that they were going for with the sci-fi, cyberpunky sort of. Once the artwork is really crisp.
That's something I loved about this one too. Like I love the art, and especially I like a lot of it being in black and white, because personally as an artist I feel like that type of penning and creation, I feel like that's more difficult. I feel like there's less room for mistakes when you're doing things in black and white, as opposed to when you can add color or smudge things or blend things. Like when you're doing the lining like that, personally, like I said, I feel like it's a little more difficult, and I found it very crisp.
Well, I think Kishiro was originally all like that, black and white. But I think with these deluxe editions that they've been releasing recently, they've started coloring some of the pages, and Kishiro has gone and done some color panels for some of the mangas here and there. He's got a YouTube channel, and you can actually go and watch him draw, and that might be something you'd be really into, Kiani. So look up Yukito Kishiro on YouTube, and there's one that he was drawing for a cover of one of the recent Mars Chronicle editions with young Yoko. That's her name before things happen and she becomes Alita. I won't spoil too much. And her friend Erica, who they're sort of on a secret mission, trying to find a counselor who's disappeared in a crashed spaceship that's become a city. And guess what the name of it is? This will be a deep pull.
I don't want to guess, Alita.
The Deja Thoris. Deja Thoris is the Princess of Mars from Robert E. Howard's The Princess of Mars series from the early 1900s.
Me either.
Oh, you could have given me dozens of guesses. I would not have got that.
That's the movie, the Disney flop, as it was, John Carter.
Oh, okay.
So the princess in John Carter is Deja Thoris.
Oh, that's a nice little cut there, little homage.
Oh yeah, Kishiro loves his homages. He references a lot of things. You may have seen Robbie the Robot and Maximilian from the Black Hole in Ido's basement.
Oh shit, Robbie the Robot's in Ido's basement?
Yeah.
I need to go back and look for that when I'm done here.
Well, actually, the original version with the motorball has a lot of heavy metal bands advertised on the billboards around the track and stuff like that, but they had to pull those for the Kodesha release because there's sort of problems with copyright and stuff like that. But
yeah, licensing issues.
Kishiro has a big thing about heavy metal bands, and you know the symbol on his head, on his forehead. Did you notice that?
On Ito's forehead?
No. Zapan.
I don't think Zapan popped up in the second volume.
Oh, he hasn't.
No, he's in the second. He's absolutely in the second volume.
Is he?
He's the one. Yeah, he did the same thing that he did in the movie. He tried to set up Alita.
Yeah. So, I was going to say I'm pretty sure he was in that one because he's kind of instrumental to this Hugo story.
It's kind of like a cross, but the bottom part of it's kind of like a curved question mark upside down.
That's actually the symbol for a band, Blue Oyster Cult.
Oh, Blue Oyster Cult.
like
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So that's the Blue Oyster Cult. Well, during the 90s was one of Kishiro's favorite bands. So
That's fascinating.
yeah. Oh, there's all these little things through the manga and through the movie. If you go and have a look at some of our, well, I mean, you've got to have a lot of spare hours, but you can sort of put it on like a podcast and listen to the live stream, unless there's an art one, in which case you kind of need to watch it. But I used to re-listen to them just to check them for things that we could have improved upon, and it's like a wealth of information about symbolism and numerology. We actually had one where all the numbers like Factory 33 and Alita's number 99 and Jashikin's 00 all mean something. And it's all spelled out in one of our live streams one of the guys put together. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Are your live
Oh yeah,
streams
yeah, they're all
available
on
anywhere
the
currently?
Alita Army YouTube channel, so they're all recorded. We're up to now. This last one was 62, I think. So we'll be up to 63 this coming week. So we're
Oh, excellent. Okay, so there's quite a bit back if people want to go through and listen to all your talks and discussions.
yeah, yeah. Probably the easiest thing to do, to check out the first year. There was a year in review. So if you listen to that one, you'll hear all the things that we got up to for 2020, and you can basically sort of work out if there's anything there that you're interested in. So have a listen to that one. You will get to listen to my voice an awful lot because I host a lot of them. So if you find my voice annoying, I apologize. But otherwise, go for it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's quite the opposite. I find it quite soothing, actually. I just want to put it on and kind of nod off. It's quite delightful.
I put people to sleep. Awesome.
Fantastic. That's totally the goal.
That's what you want to hear.
Oh, I'm actually a trained scientist, and I worked in education for a couple of decades. So I'm trained in education and context and putting information in digestible formats. So hopefully we've achieved that.
Yeah, that would make sense. You're
Oh,
very
thank
well
you.
spoken.
And I'm also a writer. I'm actually doing a bit of work at the moment with IT writing and sub-editing. So keeping my hand in that.
Oh, that's fascinating, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's a little off topic, but I know we talked about it a little bit at the break. Kiani and I obviously keep up with our own stuff. I do a little bit of primarily writing, actually, and some filming lately, sketch comedy, and Kiani, of course, does all of her painting.
Yes, I am an artiste. I do a lot of vibe checks and things like that, which are essentially like kind of like a I guess like an energy reading type thing for people, where I create these custom pieces based off of either things that they tell me, or they give me like an Instagram page or any type of pictures that they want me to look through, and then I just create a piece for them based off of that.
Ah, so you use Karmatron Dynamics then?
What is that? That is the fanciest fucking word I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, you need to keep reading the manga. So you haven't met him yet in the manga, even in the first two volumes, but his influence is already there. So the guy who rebuilt Makaku, which is Gruishki in the movie, and also rebuilt Jashigan, which is coming up in the next volume. I'm presuming you'll be reading that next. His name is Professor Destinova, and he is a scientist from Zalem who has not 1 ounce of morality. He is all about getting the result, and he doesn't care how he gets it. So yeah, he strangely helps a lot of people, and in other people who he doesn't think are worth it, he usually just horribly mutilates them. And yeah, he's not a nice
So
guy.
he's also a dastardly villain.
American healthcare system, is that you?
Is that you?
Well, he doesn't charge like they do, so I guess not.
Oh, so we're better off with the crazy
Well,
guy.
you,
All
you
right, I'll
take
take
your
that.
chances with both, but at least you don't have to pay for it
It's
with
worth
him.
a shot.
So basically,
true.
this Karmatron Dynamics thing is the thing that he's studying. He's basically trying to work out if everybody is linked to their karma and their destiny, or whether they can, I wouldn't say avoid it, but conquer it. So rather than being a tool of your karma and your destiny, it becomes a tool for you, like you to flip the tables on it. And his theory of Karmatron dynamics is basically how characters like Alita can become a focal point of change, because she has the force of will and the skills and the opportunity, especially sometimes he's helping and sometimes he's not, but basically she's an experiment of his. And he's trying to work out whether she can defeat her own karma. And he says that humanity needs to learn to defeat their own karma and become shapers of their own destiny, or they will never achieve anything. They won't.
So like So like the laws of vibration and the laws of attraction, essentially you put it into action and put it out there, and I guess bring forward your reality or the results that you're looking for, as opposed to you just life happening to you.
Yes. Are you an actor or a reactor? Can you create your karma and your destiny, or do you have it thrust upon you? And obviously, the people who don't have the will to change their outcome, he's not particularly interested in. And the ones like Alita who
Yes.
are a force of karma, like he describes her as a karmic tornado. People around her tend to die. There's certain parts in the manga where basically they call her the angel of death, and anybody who hangs out with her is considered not long for this world.
I could see that.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that too, because unlike in the movie, I found myself really liking this version of Yugo. I feel like he
Same.
came across a little bit more competent and on the ball, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Wow. You're in the minority then.
I mean, I ragged on him pretty hard for the movie. I feel like he came out notably better in this for some reason than he did in the movie.
I still think he was a little douchebag, but that's
Yeah.
like you still out here stealing freaking spines and shit, you little ass munch.
The 10 million credits caps, I don't know what the currency's called
Chips.
off the top of my head, but it seems like chips. Okay, yeah. Again, not to be too big on the point, but you could have done a lot with that kind of money. I'm just gonna throw that out there. And you know what? My point actually stands from the movie, that I was complaining that like he didn't get the money directly, he just earned it for Vector. In the manga, he gets the money directly. He could have just done anything else with that money.
It's a case study of obsession. He doesn't have any real surety that Zalem / Typhares is any better than the Scrapyard. I must admit that in the Kodeshia translation, Ido says that Zalem is a utopia. And because he's from there, it kind of sets the tone that it is. But really, Hugo does not have any concrete evidence that it is. And that's deliberate. They try and make sure that nobody down on the ground knows what it's really like up there because they don't want riots. But I'm jumping between versions because there's points that I can grab from everywhere. But in the novelization of the movie, Pat Cadigan talks about Zalem fever, where young people, when you're young, you're exploring all your options and you're looking for things to latch onto to give you purpose. And Zalem fever is a common thing that young people suffer through, where all I want to do is get to Zalem. The scrapyard is shit. I don't want to live here. I want to go to the really nice place. That must be it up there. So I want to go up there. And a lot of young people get Zalem fever, and most people get over it when the reality of life in the scrapyard hits home, and it's like, you can't get up there. You will never get up there. You have your day-to-day grind and survival to think about. Get on with it. But Hugo just lives in his head beyond that in both the manga, the OVA, in all manga, the OVA, and the movie. And because he's living in his head up in Zalem already, he doesn't understand what he's got right in front of him until it's too late. And that's the sort of talking about the loss of opportunity because you're so fixated on something that you'll never get.
I also think a lot of his obsession definitely came from, and this is in volume 2, from his experience growing up with his brother, and his brother being fixated on like trying to figure it out. But I feel like his brother was more of just like he just wanted to understand it. It's not necessarily that he wanted to be there, he just wanted to study whatever, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, his brother was more of like a curious party than someone who longed to belong.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the backstory of his brother. I do think that his wife was trash for turning him in.
Absolute trash.
But, I'm like, bitch, who does that?
You mean I can sell out my husband for a bunch of chips? Fuck it. Yeah, go ahead. He's right in there.
Go ahead.
Go right in there, behind there. He was planning on leaving. There's a balloon. Here's a blueprint that he made for it.
I just assumed everyone was going in the balloon.
Oh, clearly not on board for it.
I mean, this is the tragedy sort of side of things, and Kishiro does tragedy really, really well. I will warn listeners and your good selves that in reading this manga, there will be times when you go, fucking what? What the? Kishiro, you prick! What are you doing to these characters? What are you doing to me? Oh God. Yeah,
My emotions.
yes, all the feels. So,
It's like one of those things where you just set it down and walk away before you read because you know it's about to happen, but you're not ready for it quite yet. You just want to process it before you get to it.
or you're reading along and suddenly you turn a page and you go, fuck, I shouldn't have done that.
I should have took a break.
Oh, can I go back? I can't go back. I already know.
Yeah, can't unsee.
Yeah, that's how I felt about them hunting the dogs, man. That was pretty fucking brutal to see, even on page.
Yeah, the dogs don't do so well.
Yeah, they're not really primed for survival in this universe.
I was really excited about that dog saving the baby in the sewer. I thought that was dope. I was like, look at you. He like came in,
Oh, Fang was fucking incredible.
fucking ripped Alita's half broken arm out of what's his name?
Makaku.
Makaku. Anyway, ripped her freaking half broken arm out of his eye socket. And then I was like, he was like the perfect distraction, perfect moment. I was like, you go, dog. You're the shit. Yeah, so I really liked that part.
Yeah, there's the that's kind of one thing that also carried over from the movie. Like the barroom scene is obviously a little bit different with Ido doing the speech instead.
Yes.
But the subsequent fight where they go down into the sewers and everything, that's still like that was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, and it definitely held over for the manga. It was a great page turner.
I think that being there with her in the bar and like having her back like that, I think that I liked this version of him more because I feel like he was, like I said prior to this, he was just more accepting of it quicker and was like, all right, she's gonna do what she want to do, I'm here for it.
Yeah, this version of Ido was a little more accepting of her and the choices she wanted to make, and even like they started going on hunts together, which was kind of cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, you've got more options in a manga with material that you can present. It's sort of like a novel versus a movie. You got 2 hours if you're lucky to get that whole story pumped out. And I was actually going on an example of the berserker body in the movie. They actually spend more time getting it than they do in the manga, which is surprising. It's sort of the reverse of what you were just talking about then. But in the OVA, they don't even mention it. She just gets put in it. It just happens, and there's no backstory.
Wow, talk about cutting out some fat.
Well, they did. They had to. They had 30 minutes or 25 minutes to get through the whole volume worth of stuff. And they introduced a new character because Chiron wasn't in the manga at all, as you probably noticed. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of the characters that did hold over though, into the movies that I recognize, like Zappin and you just said his name, Makaku. Yeah, they were like great villains. Even the sick burn on Japan in the second volume, and she didn't recognize them. Like, I really just appreciated their designs and the different approaches that they had of trying to get like revenge on her.
I really enjoyed Makaku's design of him being like the grub worm looking thing and how he could just slide up into someone else's body. Like, I really liked that concept.
He absolutely reminded me of the slug version of Freddy Krueger and Freddy vs. Jason.
And a lot of people sort of complain about the movie that, oh, it was derivative, there was this and there was that, and I've seen it before. It's like, yeah, well, this was written from a manga that was written, decades earlier, and they probably pinched it from them in the first place. A lot of people cannot deal with seeing themes and events across multiple stories and say, oh, that's not original.
Nothing is original.
Yeah, everybody's pulling from the same creative spaces at a certain point. You're not going to find anything too unique. You're going to be able to break it down and track it to something else.
But you also get trends. An example of which is back in the 80s, there was a series of movies that came out right around the time of The Abyss and what was the other one? But anyway, there was 3 about being trapped underwater and bad shit happening. And they're trends. Somebody sees that something's doing well and they go, I can write something like that, and they get on the bandwagon. So you'll see a lot of that. It runs in trends, it runs in waves. There was a really interesting novel that I was reading called Vacuum Flowers, which is, I read it way back in the 80s and then more recently. But the story talks about humanity living like out in the asteroid belt because the Earth has become a collective consciousness. All the people have been linked together and they're pretty much like the Borg now. And it's probably where the idea for the Borg came from, because this was written before the Borg happened on Star Trek.
See, there you go again, just claiming people ripped someone else off, Ray. You know, I'm getting real tired of your shit.
You can look at it that way, or you can look at it in the way I'm about to describe to you. Alrighty, so they talk about you could watch on the Earth ideas rippling out from a point of like somebody on Earth will have an idea, and because they're all connected, it will ripple out like stones thrown into a pond, and you see the ripples traveling across the other people on Earth, and other ripples, exactly your vibration thing, but other ripples will come from other areas and they cross each other, and then you get different effects because you've got multiple things crossing at different points. And entertainment is like that too. It's like you get a stone dropped in a pond, and if something really resonates, you get lots of ripples, and then you start seeing the same thing appearing in other places or versions thereof. And this is the ripples crossing each other and getting new things. And it's actually good because if you were to create, like, say, okay, anybody who writes a story has to sit there and come up with everything in their own head. And if you were to do that, sure, if you've got a really good imagination, you might come up with something interesting, but it wouldn't be referencing anything. It wouldn't be Easter egging anything. It wouldn't be referencing, and that's what people like. They like connection. I mean, I don't understand why
they like to resonate with what they're interacting
exactly,
with.
but I don't know why they bitch about it in the first place.
Yeah, no, I don't
mean,
understand.
why are you bitching about having a connection and an understanding with this work?
I don't want to be that guy. I just feel like a lot of people just want a reason to bitch, if I'm being honest.
I think we can all agree on that. I mean, the internet may have been created for porn, but it now exists for bitching.
Joke's on you. It's now 50% porn and 50% bitching.
Well, if we start bitching about the porn, then we got it entirely covered, don't we?
I think the internet, the one thing the internet will mostly agree on is that they'll never bitch about the porn.
Well, a certain small part of the community, you know, the heavy religious types might, but other than that,
they still enjoy it. They just don't want to talk about it. Anyways,
this is true.
They're just closeted with their porn watching. That's all.
So yeah, the Alita volumes kind of picks up a lot of similar beats. Like I mentioned, the barroom scene with Idol going in there. I definitely enjoyed that in the movie, maybe because it was a little bit more clear to follow, or it wasn't as easy for me to, follow in the manga. But she had the berserker body by then, which was a little bit. She didn't? Did she have the berserker body in volume 1?
Yes, she did. But I do believe she got the berserker body a lot quicker.
She did.
In the manga than she did in the movie.
Okay, I was trying to remember. Yeah, because in the manga she gets in a fight with Makaku earlier, and then she gets the berserker body and goes to the bar. Okay.
Yeah, because her first fight with him in the movie was in the bar, but her first fight in the berserker body period was with him.
Yeah, and in the bar she still punches his eye. That much still carried through.
And then, like, honestly, like, once I heard his backstory, like, I kind of felt for him a little bit. Like, and Alita did too, and I liked that came across in the manga.
I mean, look, I'm like one bad day away from wanting to be Makaku, so I kind of get it. Like, it's relatable.
You want to eat brains?
What? And I want grind cutters to shoot out of my fingers. Yes.
Well, that's slightly different, but yeah.
I want all of it.
But he pinched those from a gladiator in the arena. They were never his original.
Oh, that is true. That wasn't his original quote unquote body.
Yeah, no, because that was him like slithering up into dude's body, and I was like, I love this. That is so fucking cool.
Body horror.
Yeah, it's much better than the version he had in the movie where he kept getting replaced and everything. Like, this is a much more interesting take, I think.
More of like him on his own.
Well, it was probably too much body horror for a PG-13 rating. They probably
considered. Yeah, that is unfortunate too. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would do better as an anime because you could do like the hard R stuff, but
in the movie, he was like more of like a paid hitman to an extent, and then in here, he's just him. You know what I'm saying? He's not reporting to anyone. He's doing this for the pure joy of himself.
He's an experiment. He's a Destiny Nova experiment. It's just you don't know
it yet. Oh, okay.
We don't know it until the next volume.
Next time.
Yeah. Well, he explains it to Alita when they're in that plasma bubble.
Yeah, he did. He did tell her that someone had found him, but it didn't. lead on to who, but I did see, doesn't it? I do believe it does show the symbol on his forehead.
On Maku's?
No, on the scientist who found him as a child when he was like rotting away in the sewer.
Does it show the scientist in Volume 1?
It just shows like a blurred image of him.
Okay.
It's all hinted, yeah.
I'm sure, as Ray mentioned, yeah, it'll be covered in Volume 3 when we eventually get to it.
Oh no, it doesn't really come up until quite a bit later.
Oh, okay.
Nova's like the big bad and is hinted at all the way through until it sort of comes to a head.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of much more of a build-up than just the first few volumes. All right.
You've got so much good shit to come. You're going to start really, oh my god. Oh.
I was already excited. You make me more excited.
Look, it's like wedding night. I'm telling you, it's fantastic.
Do you guys have any more thoughts on Volume 1 before we go on to the second volume?
Well, like I said, Volume 1 is sort of like the pilot, or the first half of the pilot. So it's a bit rough. Nothing's really fully embedded yet. So give it a chance, keep reading, because there's so much amazing stuff in this manga. Some of the things are a little bit hard to take if you're concerned about things about older men and younger women and things like that. But nothing like that tends to come to pass. It's mainly the violence. But there's themes in there that might cause some distress to some people.
Okay, themes that kind of cross over into a little bit of iffy territory. I can understand that. I'm sure people appreciate the warning.
But the movie did it so much better, bringing in Shirin as the wife and the previous Alita and everything like that. It was far more palatable for a general audience.
Yeah, the movie definitely did a good job building background, and especially for a PG-13 audience.
Exactly.
All right, so Volume 2. Who would like to get the discussion started here with the Hunter Warriors and all this?
Can I just say that Hugo, or Yugo, as he is in some of the other translations, is a dick in this.
Fair enough. I mean, at least the guy in the comic, or the manga, sorry, seems like the type that would have absolutely taken her heart in the movie if it was offered.
Mhm.
He would just be like, oh, sweet, this will work.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I feel like, when he was all like chased down and everything, and she finally like confronted him about like asking if he liked her the way she liked him, it was like because she got kind of aggressive, which, girl, I feel like that would scare anyone into being like, yes, I love you. Like she slammed the wall next to his head, and I was like, ma'am, that's aggressive.
I was gonna say, what the fuck are you supposed to say in that situation? Yeah, of course I love you. I love you to death.
I would have been like, yes, baby, let's get married right now. Please don't murder me.
No, he strikes me as someone who's entirely in it for himself, or at least like he comes first.
But like, I feel like because he looks at her and he has this moment where he's like,
I gotta give him a little credit though. He was very open about the fact that he was a body harvester. At least he was like, no, I didn't do that. Occasionally, some body parts fell off. Sure.
I feel like he almost like took advantage of that situation. Like, she likes me, she's gonna help me get out of this, so I'm gonna be like, yeah, she is pretty. I could get into this. Like, you're not into her as much as she's into you, or at least that's how I feel.
Well, you see, that's the difference between a PG-13 movie and manga from the 90s, which is dark cyberpunk. So in dark cyberpunk, you do whatever you have to do to survive. And it's sort of said in the movie that that's what you got to do. It's sort of led up to, but it's way more cutesy in the movie than it is in the manga. The manga is hard ass. And you just have to look, just jumping back to Volume 1 for a minute, but you just have to look at the people just wandering by when Ito's there bleeding out with Alita's core like all trashed, and he's dragging himself through the street and everybody's just walking past him like it's an everyday occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
There's that picture too of one guy that's just covered in needles, and I had to stop and really analyze that, because that was a hardcore like pedestrian with just 6 needles sticking out of him as that's happening.
That's kind of echoed in the design of one of the characters for the murder ball section of the movie. The guy that had the bolts in his head. I think that's kind of where they sourced that from.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the people that live in the scrapyard on a person-to-person or cyborg-to-cyborg basis really care all that much for each other. Or at least, not in the earlier volumes. Obviously, I have no clue if that changes.
No. Well, the thing is that Alita is a force for change, and when she rocks up into the world of the scrapyard, and starts caring about people, other people see this and go, hey, yeah, we can actually care about each other. It doesn't have to be a complete, shitheadsville the entire time.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got.
Well, as you read on, you will see that Alita changes a lot of people's attitudes. She gets a lot of people killed too, but that's just the world that they live in. But she changes a lot of people's attitudes, and she starts up a martial arts school to help people learn to protect themselves and all sorts of shit. And she helps a lot of the hunter warriors become more positive and more moralistic as well. So I mean, she is a force of change, and that's why she's interesting to Destiny Nova.
Yeah.
By the end of the movie, it did seem like she did, at least positively affect the motorball tournament and the people there because everyone was chanting for her. It seemed like there's more of a unifying force there as opposed to what it was before, which was just kind of chaotic cheering for destruction. So, I mean, they kind of hinted towards that leading up to what I assume is, again, I assume they have to come up with a second movie at some point.
Yes, that is our greatest desire, that we can get another movie. There's all sorts of discussions about possibilities of series on Disney Plus and all this sort of stuff. But what I think Cameron's holding out for is movies. He likes his big budget, big spectacle movies that should be on a big screen.
Yeah.
And COVID's kind of just, popped that bubble. But hopefully we can blow that bubble back up again when it's in the rear vision mirror.
He'll plan for Alita 2, 3, and 4 in 2030, 31, and 32. It'll be fine. He'll shoot it way out there just like he does with the Avatar movies. It's fine. We all know the way he works. It'll be all right.
We have members who are very concerned about that because they're in their 70s.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I do feel like if it's James Cameron, that might be the direction he takes it. But like, if it's initially a Disney property, I don't know if he still has the rights to it. I could see them making a series out of it, especially with Disney Plus, because they're always looking for more things to do.
Well, he hasn't made it clear who has the rights to it. We had a feeling there for a while that he'd optioned the live action rights and it was 20th Century Fox who had the animated rights. But then later, Calogridis was saying that you buy the option from the original IP owner, and then when you make the movie, then the studio buys the rights. So it may be that Disney does have the rights.
They might have, yeah. They very well could, especially because I assume with Disney, they're going to be a little more on top of it and like ironclad with getting rights to possible franchises.
Well, yeah, they have been harvesting rights for, a couple of decades now. So
yeah, Disney, they're doing their thing. Hey, Disney, if you're listening and you'd like to hire me for like Alien or Star Wars, I swear I've never said anything bad about you, and I will work for scale, so don't worry about it.
Well, you'd want to stand out from the crowd and not be a suck up there, Cody. So I would actually pitch it that you understand that story sells and message doesn't. So put story first and message second. You will make the money, unlike a lot of the people they have working for them now.
If I could just talk to someone there who because I don't want to do it publicly, but if I could just sit down with someone related to Star Wars and just discuss the last 3 movies and just go over some notes that I have. I don't want to be a dick. I just have some notes.
That's fair enough. I mean, do you know of a YouTuber named the Critical Drinker?
I do not.
Okay, check him out. He's quite good. I don't agree with everything he says, but for the most part, he's pretty on point.
I like that.
He's actually a novelist as well. He's got a series of I think they're either detective novels or police novels or spy novels in that realm.
Right.
And he analyzes movies and looks at what they did right and what they did wrong, and he's quite harsh on Disney. And he basically thinks that story over message is the way to go as well. But he does this thing called the Drinker Fixes, and it sounds very much like what you're suggesting. So have a look at those. You might find some parallels there.
That does sound like a fascinating thing to check out.
Because he's fixed Ray in one of his videos.
Yeah. To get back on topic while we still have a few minutes left here. So, who do you guys feel like actually cared more for Alita, Yugo or Makaku? Because it feels like Makaku maybe actually cared a little bit more about Alita than Yugo did, in his own weird, perverse way.
I would say Makaku probably, in his own weird, perverse way. I still maintain that I feel like Yugo's using her to an extent.
Welcome to the crazy, mixed-up head of Yukito Kishiro. A lot of time has been spent on YouTube, and you can sort of YouTube search all these videos out and have a watch of them after you finish the manga. But a lot of it is based on everything is grey, sort of the vibe. There's nobody who's absolutely right, nobody who's absolutely wrong. Just like normal people, they think they're doing the right things. Often they'll be doing it for the wrong reasons. And they'll have been driven to a particular course of action through experiences that have fucked them up. And they're not completely bad. Makaku wasn't completely bad. He was a fucker and who didn't give a shit about other people, but he had his reasons and he had some good points hidden away there until the very end. And even the worst bad guy, they think they're doing the right thing, and their methods are really, really, really. The path to hell is paved with good intentions.
I mean, hell, a classic example of that would be Darth Vader in Star Wars.
Misunderstood and mistreated.
Yeah. Well, you look at him when he's talking to Luke, and he says, we'll kill the Emperor because he's a cunt, and we'll take over the galaxy, and we'll have order. I want order. I want everything to be ordered. I want it to make sense, and I want it to be under control. And we're the best people to control it because we have force power. So there. And he had this. It's not a bad thing to think that you want order so that everything can function, and there'll be laws and people will have rules to abide by, and everything will work. That's not in itself a bad thing, but it's the way you go about it that's the problem.
Yeah, that's how you get to fascism.
And killing people. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't really have a segue for that one, but do you guys have any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave off with on Alita?
You shouldn't ask me that, because I'll give you 4 hours of non-stop.
Close with you, Ray. I got you.
I would most certainly love to read more. Personally, I definitely enjoyed the manga a lot better than the movie, but I feel like I understand the concepts. I understand the movie a little bit better now that I have begun to read the manga. I feel like the storyline was better, which, I mean, obviously in a movie things get compressed. I love that Alita's a full-on badass, but still has this like human heart to her. And I also loved the idea that the brain and spine cannot be like roboticized, and that's why they're worth so much on the black market.
Well, the whole spine thing went the way of the dodo with the movie because ripping people's spines out was a bit too much for PG-13.
Yeah.
Complete side note, I'm really excited for Mortal Kombat that comes out in a couple days. Anyways.
But yeah, so I mean, spines aren't a problem in the movie verse, but obviously these are sort of the details that don't really impact upon the major themes and the ideas carried through and the questions asked by the story. So that's why the movie still works but is different. The OVA still works but is different. The manga still works but is different. The novelizations still work but they're different. And I guess I'll wrap up my side of things by talking very sort of holistically about variations of a story, because a lot of younger people have a real problem when their mind comes up against the variation to a story that they've sort of absorbed in their youth or they've really come to love, and they can't deal with the variation from it. So, I mean, I experienced this myself when I was younger, that I went to see, this is giving away my age, but I went to see the Dune movie, the original one in '84, and I read the novel first, but the novel had so much more in it, so much richer. So the movie was good. I recognize that now. And being a student of story and themes and all that sort of richness, I like the novel far better than the movie. But the picture paints 1,000 words, and you can see so much more in a movie that you can't see in a novel. So they have their places. And the whole thing about the Alita multiverse, I'll call it, because there's the movie verse, the manga verse. The OVA verse is very small, so it doesn't really, it's a pocket more than anything. But trying to justify these things, and I've had to do that because, as I mentioned when we were off air, that I'm writing a treatment for it's a novelization of what I think should be in the next movie, following on from the original Alita Battle Angel. I'm trying to pull together stuff from the novelizations, the movie, because the movie's different It came after the novelizations for the movie, so there's variations in there. Then I'm pulling from the manga and from the OVA, and putting a little bit of my own ideas into it to mix it up a little bit. So trying to pull 5 threads together into a coherent story and make it touch on all of these things and draw them together and still be its own original thing is quite a complex endeavor. And I've been doing reasonably well at it. So I'll share you that link because it's available online. But you shouldn't read it until after you've got a bit further in the manga, because it does draw a lot from the manga. So you can actually, as you read it, go, oh, that's from the manga, that's from the movie, that's from the novels, and you can see where all these little bits come from. It's a patchwork, and it makes it like a patchwork quilt. You get all these little bits of material and you sew them all together and they become something new and bigger, but they've sourced from other places. So it's like making a patchwork quilt of a story. And I'll finish with the thing that made me realize that variations of a story is actually a good thing. Is that I've going back even further, I was a huge fan in my youth of the original Battlestar Galactica, which was the campy late 70s version around the time of the original Star Wars. Science fiction was just really popping then. Everybody was like, oh, wow, this science fiction stuff's really cool now. It's sort of becoming more mainstream. And Battlestar Galactica was it was a bit depressing because, everything had been blown up and they were running away. But then it was also campy and adventurous, and there was a bit of fun in there as well. So it had all those emotional elements tied up in it, which were really good for, like a young man to sort of have the experience of, because, you've got to be ready for all those things as you grow up. And then I saw the early 2000s version, and I watched the pilot and I watched the first episode and I go, no, this isn't Battlestar Galactica. I can't deal with this. It's too different. Starbuck is a freaking woman. I always saw myself as Apollo, but one of my mates
offended.
was always Starbuck. And it's like, no, Starbuck can't be a woman. This is impossible. Blah, 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 blah. And it's that rigidity of youth in that you've experienced something that's meant so much to you that you can't bear to see it changed in any way.
Yeah.
And the manga purists, because there are manga purists for Alita, who didn't like the movie because it wasn't a panel by panel retelling. And I'll also, I'll just say first that I got over that by the end of the first season of the new Battlestar Galactica, 20 years ago, I got over that and understood that the retelling is a way of exploring it in a different way. It's not, the original still exists.
Yeah.
So if I want to go back and experience the original, I can just go and do it. But this is a retelling. This is looking at it through a different lens. This is looking at it through somebody else's eyes and imagination. And it's a good thing. Variation and getting different ways of experiencing things is good, especially in education, because not everybody learns in the same way. Not everything will resonate with every person. So if you tell it in a different way, and this is what you do in education, you'll explain something and half the class will get it. The other half of the class will be giving you that look. That look, that the head slightly tilted, eyebrows up, confused.
I am very familiar with giving that look, yes.
Those in education spend their lives trying to work out how to explain things to people, and they've studied the different ways of learning, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and finding now they attempt to find ways to provide the same information in multiple formats so that everybody can take it in. And that's what retellings do. They give you a different version of the same themes and ideas, and it will resonate with different people. And doing it 20, 30 years later, the society's changed and people have changed. The kids that are growing up now deal with things differently than when I was growing up. And I'm amazed by that. It's like, wow, that's really cool. And so you need to react to that and tell it a different way for the new generation to resonate with. And that's why this is a 90s manga, and the movie tells it in a different way because it resonates more with the young people of today. So you need these different tellings for different age groups, and you need to understand that it's all part of the whole and have a holistic view and see that it's marvelous that we can do this, that we have the freedom of Western society to have retellings. I mean, I'm not talking about, every couple of years rebooting something, but just a retelling that honors the original, and the movie really does, and passes on those themes in a more digestible format to the current generation. So this is what native populations did. They retold their stories, and they morphed over time, and they fit in more with each generation as they morph. So this is actually something we need.
Yeah, I would feel like the movie does do that pretty well, especially trying to get like a younger audience to get them like to become fans of the franchise, and that way you can bring them in maybe at a later date when they're a little more prepared for it, but into the manga and become like lifelong fans of the series. Because that's kind of what you want to do with something that's PG-13, and if you're going to start off something like this, that I can only assume they wanted to make like a movie franchise, like cinematic universe out of.
You've got it all ahead of you. It's like, yeah.
Absolutely,
I am
not,
coming
yeah.
back to talk to you guys when you've read a few more volumes.
We would love
Because
that.
I want to listen to you go, oh my God, that happened? And then, how does this connect? It connects like this. Oh. It's like the realization. Little light bulbs going off all over the place. It's great fun. It's storytelling. It's great.
So you're ready. What you're saying is you want to be here for our geek out session. You said?
Opposed to just listening to us and going like, no, that's not how you pronounce the fucking name. How are you forgetting about this part?
I feel like I'm the elder statesman who can. You'll be discussing something. I'll go, hey, what about this? And you go, oh crap, I never thought about it. It just changes everything. I go,
I love this concept.
It's great. It's great fun.
Yes, I agree.
It's good. We have a resident Alita expert. I think we needed one for the amount of stuff we have to cover ahead.
You will get a lot of podcasts out of this, and if you're honest and really give it its due, probably the whole Alita Army will be listening along. So
that's awesome.
I'll get you some more listeners.
Well, we appreciate that. I mean, I'm mostly just glad to have you on here to talk about it because I wanted like a hardcore fan of it. And that's another thing too, is that I know you said it was kind of rough for the first volume, but honestly, it didn't feel like it. It seemed like they kind of knew where they were going and where the story was headed. And that might be just because I'd seen the movie, but I'm kind of excited to see like where it goes and how much more extreme it gets because I was a big fan of like the levels of violence they were already starting to show.
Oh yeah, wait till it gets to Motorball. It's amazing how he can draw that stuff and make it look almost like it's moving.
Yeah.
There's been a few people who this sort of YouTube thing that's been going on for a few years now, where you take a cell from a comic or a manga and animate it, so you make it move a bit. And obviously, there's always space in cyberpunk for more blood, so you add a bit of blood splatter and some sound effects and stuff, and you can pretty much animate it. In fact, there's a guy who's doing a semi-animated version of the first. I think he's still on the first volume, but he was doing an animated version. I'll have to dig that up for you, and getting people to voice the characters and everything.
That's cool.
It is kind of cool.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting.
It's a lot of work though, so I'm expecting it to sort of fall over at some point, like a lot of these fan-made things do. But it's worth having a look at.
Yeah, I've tried.
There's a reason why we don't do any animation over here. That seems like a whole gargantuan task.
My intention is to do a reading of my novelization eventually when I get around to it.
I can't wait to hear it.
I mean, hey, I'm on board. Just let us know. So Ray, where can people follow you online?
So it's at OPTIMIZTICOZZIE. So Optimistic Aussie. That's on Twitter. It's probably the best place to find me. You can also find me on the Alita Army YouTube channel, #Alita Army, all one word. I'm the host. Well, I'm one of the two hosts now of the live streams, so you'll hear me on there quite regularly. And basically, if you saw the movie and you'd like a sequel, you are part of the Alita Army. It's very low bar for entry. So the Alita Army is well, we have a dedicated core. There's a lot of people who are just sort of waiting for a sequel, but there's a group that really feel like, with the success of the Snyder Cut group, who we're quite involved with as well, that we feel like we should be doing something as well. So that's why we've got the live stream going, and it's also to keep the fandom popping and pulsing and positive, because with these huge numbers of years of gaps with before things happen, especially with COVID slowing everything down, we feel like people will just drift away to other things, and this is a property that has got such legs on it that it shouldn't be, forgotten about. We don't want one and done. We want some more movies. We want a series. We want, heaps more merch, the whole box and dice. So it is really enjoyable. I mean, there's a lot of people who complain about the eyes. And again, this is that whole inflexibility of youth thing coming through. People can't deal with something that's a bit different. Those eyes are only 1.25 times bigger than normal. It's just that people are so used to a particular size that anything that's bigger or smaller, they react to quite strongly if they're not ready for it. But I mean, the people who really resonate with this movie, they look at those eyes and they go, the windows to the soul, and they're big and they're beautiful. So,
Yeah, I was really glad that they were big. I was like, they're big like anime eyes.
Yeah, I know on the original episode, Keanu was obsessed with her eyes a little bit.
So there's a couple of things on that. They wanted to make them look like the eyes in the anime. Anime eyes are actually based off of the eyes from early Disney, with the large eyes. So, what goes around comes around. It's actually, people complain, oh, they're anime eyes. Well, actually, no, they're Disney eyes originally. But I mean, it concerns me that there's those people out there are so unaccepting of minor differences. We live in such a multi-connected world. The world is so much smaller than it used to be. The boundaries that used to be between country and race are not really there anymore with the internet. And being accepting is super important in this new technological world, because you run up against a lot of different people. Rule number one of the internet: don't be a dick. The one rule nobody can follow on the bloody Twitter.
If you want to talk about having a low bar, like the bare minimum requirement for being a decent person is just to be respectful. Like that's a pretty fairly easy thing to do. Just don't be a dick. We just wanted you to do one thing. We gave you all the free porn. You have all the music you want. Just don't be a dick. You guys chose to be a dick in every comment section.
Well, people like to complain. It's a weird thing. But I will say that people who are attracted to the message of Alita, it's not like a cult or anything, but people who love the idea of the show and the themes and all that sort of stuff tend to be the people who are accepting and who are question what is it to be human, and where are we going, and what is all this technology going to have an effect on us. And they're very good people. Like they have their faults, they make mistakes like everybody does, but in general they're good people. And that's why I spent so much time with the Alita Army and talking about Alita, because it resonates with good people. And if you go on Twitter and look up the Alita Army, there's a few rat bags, but generally most of them are really good people, and they're a great bunch of people to hang out with. And I actually, my experience of Twitter has been like 95, well, I would say 99, but it hasn't been quite that much, but 95% positive. So you can't say that very often about the various parts of Twitter.
That's good, because I was warned about Twitter before I got on there.
So was I. Like seriously, like people said, don't go there, don't go near there.
They were like, be careful, Twitter's not TikTok. Because on TikTok, they're all very nice and sweet, and everyone's really supporting. And then people are like, they will rip you apart on Twitter. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. A big part of the reason why I actually decided to re-dip or re-dive into the manga and check out more of the Alita stuff was because of how welcoming and warm like everybody was after I saw the movie. Like the fan base was so hardcore and happy about it. They wanted everyone to like check it out and be welcomed and invited. With the exception of one guy who was kind of a dick, but other than that, everyone was just glad to spread the word and try to be positive about the movie.
Well, we've got to have an exception. There's got to be an exception to make the rule.
Which I think is refreshing, Because I feel like a lot of people, like, especially when it comes to, like, people who are, like, hardcore about, like, a particular fandom and stuff, I feel like a lot of them are like, "Oh, you fucking noobs," and this, that, and the third, so I feel like, the Alita Army being that way was great.
It was literally like, oh no, we need to aim for bigger podcasts to be on. I'm like, all right, well that's kind of a
I
dick
won't
comment,
name
but I see your point.
I won't name names, but he's all about clicks and counts and all this sort of stuff, and I think he
Yeah.
misses the point. Really?
Yeah, it was a little hurtful, but I mean, I was like, all right, fair point. I get what you're trying to do, but I'm not gonna dive too deep into that. Kiani, where can people find you?
You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Abundant Studio, and then on Twitter at _Kiani, which my name is Keyauani. And then you can also, I also have a website, which is abundantstudio.com.
And as always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at Robots Don't Age. You can also follow me at Cody Has Coffee. And I know I don't talk about it much, but don't be afraid to go to the website redlensproductions.com, REDLENSPRODUCTIONS. It's a long one. I need to work on that. Anyways, that's where we have all of our stuff. The podcast episodes are slowly being updated. All those can be found on Spotify, but we have the skits and some stuff like that up there as well, just a little bit of variety. But thank you guys for listening. I know it's a little bit of a longer episode, but I thought it was really enjoyable, and
Yeah,
thank
thank
you, Ray,
you.
for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. You guys do show notes, yeah?
Yeah.
I'll drop you some links to for the Alita Army stuff in the show notes. It's probably the easiest way than trying to verbalize it all.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, yeah, I'll throw it in the show notes so you can find that under Spotify, YouTube, all the places where this should be uploaded.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for coming on. It was lovely.